Yeah, so I would say the vast majority is going to be travel nurses or traveling medical professionals, but there are also insurance companies that have housing lists where, say, your house burns down. You do need temporary housing, and your insurance would help set you up in temporary housing that's furnished. So there's also stuff like that. There's also military housing. There's corporate housing. So, like, if you only need housing for like a 3 month stint for some kind of travel job through your company that's not a medical professional, um, there's lists for that, like corporate housing by owner is one of them.
Welcome to the Creating Wealth Podcast, where Kyle Curtin takes you on an extraordinary journey alongside renowned multifamily real estate experts from every corner of the United States. We teach you how to harness the power of real estate investing and witness the transformation of your wealth building strategy. Let's create wealth together.
What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 105 of the Creating Wealth Podcast. Today, we have the great pleasure of chatting with Jessie Dillon. Jessie is an absolutely phenomenal investor and entrepreneur from Central Mass with a killer story. I'm super excited to jump in. She started with humble beginnings not too long ago and has grown her real estate portfolio to a valuation of $1.5 million through only 5 doors in 9 months, owns multiple businesses, was a guest on the BP Rookie podcast, and is semi-retired. Jessie, what is going on? Super excited to jump in here today. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you for being here. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to just sharing my story and any insights on another podcast. Because once I got on the BP Rookie podcast, it's kind of been this wave of other people inviting me to their podcasts. So it's just been cool to get to share my story with a lot of different audiences.
That's super cool. It definitely is a lot of fun, to kind of jump on like different shows and like have like different conversations and stuff. And it's cool stuff. Yeah, so super excited to have you.
Definitely.
So let's jump right in. What's I guess what kind of like, well, you can jump in wherever you want.
So about 5-6 years ago, I was working at a big box beauty retailer, so like a beauty retailer in the mall. And it was great until it wasn't. Ultimately, I started a family and realized like I really just work at the mall. Like, this is a glorified mall job. There's really not like as much of a future in it as I had expected. So I started to kind of build up different ways of making money while I was there, making an escape plan. So I started working at a spa 1 day a week. I learned a new skill, which is permanent makeup, also known as cosmetic tattooing. And I took my time transitioning out of that big box beauty retailer, doing those kind of side hustles. But the side hustle really turned into this big thing within a year. So I opened my own beauty business. And again, this is like 5 or 6 years ago. Totally went off on my own, like dove headfirst into entrepreneurship. And since then, I've grown the beauty business so that it's no longer just me. I have a team of artists. And but even that, about a year ago, I realized, okay, I can't physically do this work forever. There has to be another escape plan now. So if I am going to transition away from physically taking clients in my beauty business, because it is kind of physically taxing doing the work. You wouldn't think so, but every beauty service provider that I know has like neck problems, wrist problems. So I needed to make another escape plan. First, I learned about this whole FIRE community and I was all in. I'm like 70% savings rate. I can retire in 11 years, but I'm like, wait a minute, I can't do this for another 11 years. That's still too long. And I came across someone on a podcast who was achieving FIRE through real estate. And it sounded like I could do it in more like 2 years if I take that route. So I'm like, okay, I got to figure this out. And this was summer of 2021. So this was just over a year ago that I figured out what real estate investing even is and that you don't have to be super rich or like old to do it. Because I think most of us thought that that was the case like before we actually started, that you have to be like, much older, really wealthy before you can even get into something. Yeah. So last fall, so just about a year ago, I got really into the BP Rookie podcast. I took their rookie boot camp. I read every book. I took coaching calls with people. I listened to every podcast, and I just soaked it all up for maybe like 3 or 4 months. And by Thanksgiving last year, so just about a year ago, I started making offers. So that's kind of how I got into real estate investing. And since then, I've just really fallen in love with it. I love how much control you have over the success of your investments with real estate versus what I was doing prior, investing 70% of my money in index funds, because you don't really have that much control over what goes on with your index funds. And I just love how fast you can build up enough passive income. We say passive, but it's not that passive. But I love how fast you can build up enough passive income to get you where you need to be with real estate. So that's kind of why I'm here and why I get into it.
Of course. That's absolutely awesome. And I definitely agree with you on kind of that control aspect of, just having a lot more. Yeah, I mean, being able to kind of control that direction a lot more of like what returns look like and different, ways to add value to a property and like put the rents up and coin op machines and like there's just so many different things that you can do to really like, you know, juice that as much as you can.
Right.
And although, like investing in index funds and everything is good for diversification and like, I definitely love that as well. Just have like a Roth IRA that like I try to fill up every year and stuff. But you're totally right. Like you just kind of put the money in and other people take care of it and hope that things go good.
Yeah.
But that's absolutely awesome. Wow. Oh my goodness. That's really cool too about.
Yeah, and I've been pretty busy since then.
Yeah, totally. So I guess tell us about kind of like the first time that you were going to put an offer in, like, like you're walking that, like if you remember, like, was it a 2-family, 3-family? Like what was kind of going through your head? Like, holy crap,
Oh,
like
yeah.
this is real. Like,
Yeah. So the first property that we got under contract, and when I say we, I mean me and my husband. I mostly do all the real estate stuff together, but he's an electrician and knows a lot more about like renovations and stuff than I do. So especially if I'm going to walk a property, I love when he can come with me. But the first one we walked was a 2-family. We were going to get into it with an FHA loan. We were going to have 1 unit vacant before closing. And it was in an amazing neighborhood, but it was the worst house in that neighborhood, which was great because there was so much value add opportunity there. And we're like, all the neighbors would be so happy that we would make this house like so much, more visually appealing. Like they would love it. And it was definitely more renovations than I think we were meant to do at that time because it was going to be a lot. We didn't end up actually getting to close on it because the tenants that were supposed to vacate before closing just wouldn't leave. So we ultimately, like, rates went up so high that it no longer made sense financially. So we just had to back out. But I think by the time we were making offers, I had been absorbing so much information, like every waking moment. Like my poor clients at my beauty salon, they all had to learn about real estate because all we listened to was podcasts. But people actually really liked it. So, they weren't totally tortured. But I felt like everything started sounding the same. Like every podcast, I had already learned about that a week ago. And of course, in real estate, you can never stop learning. Like the limit does not exist. It's an ever evolving industry and there's always more to learn. But I was listening to beginner podcasts and reading beginner books. So when all those things started sounding redundant, I knew it was time to stop consuming more information and just start doing something with the info I already had. So when I did start to offer, I actually felt really confident. I felt really like this is the next step. This is what I'm supposed to be doing right now. And I also think I was kind of blissfully ignorant when it came to like the costs of certain renovations and repairs and stuff like that. But yeah, it was cool because I got 2 properties under contract at the same time, like my first 2. And the first 2 investment properties I made offers on, actually, I got both of them under contract at the same time. And this was fall of 2021. So it was very competitive at that time. but I actually did have the means to get both. But I was kind of hoping one was going to fall through because I didn't really want to like bite off more than I could chew. So it just was the perfect, everything was in alignment that duplex didn't work out, like that it fell through. So
Yeah. I definitely relate to you on the kind of like the seeing those costs and just kind of like, oh yeah, it probably won't be too bad.
yeah.
I'm getting a really good gauge of that right now. Because I'm turning one of my units in Leominster and I'm actually like tracking like everything that I've spent money on, like when it comes to that turnover. And I'm like, oh, that's like $5,000. I'm like, I never would have thought, like just clean it up, throw some paint, like this, that, the other. And all of a sudden, like there's $5,000 like, that you put into this unit. And it's interesting, you know what I mean? And you're just kind of like, oh yeah, it probably won't be too bad. And until, you actually start to see like how everything, kind of went. That's super cool though, especially like kind of getting both of those properties at the same time. And like, I can imagine it must have been a little bit stressful, right? Trying to like, just get everything aligned and get all like the paperwork and the dates and like, have everything kind of going together.
Yeah, it was a little crazy because especially since we were going to be using an FHA loan for the one that ultimately fell through, there was that much more paperwork and phone calls with like the lending piece of that one. Um, but yeah, I think it was a lot of just putting out fires every day. Like every day there would be someone who needs a certain document for me or something that, needs to be reworked. And I was just ready for it and made myself available for that. So it wasn't too bad. But back to your point, one of my peers actually was telling me the other day that the average cost of turning over a unit is like 6,500. And I was totally shocked by that. I'm like, really? That's like the average? But like you said, once you actually line item everything and add it all up, it adds up,
Yeah, it definitely does. And it's
So that just goes to show the importance of like being a stand-up landlord so that you don't have to keep like always getting new people in there.
uh-huh. Yeah, I totally agree. And to be honest, like that wasn't even something that I was thinking about at all until I started tracking those metrics. And it's like, oh crap, all right, like, a tenant's leaving or whatever, like everything's cool and their rent is like $700 below market. Perfect. I'll just get in there real quick, like do a couple of things, make it look pretty, and then, be able to list it for $2,000 or something like that. And it's like, well, actually, that fridge needs to go, like all this stuff needs to get done. Like you might have to ching up a little bit to get it where you want it. It's very interesting though, and yeah. So there's a lot.
Yeah, I think that's a
Oh, sorry.
I think that's a good oh, it's okay. I think that's a good testament to how like, people who are not in real estate see the rents that they're paying and they see the mortgage that you are paying and that's all they see. So this is just a good testament to how like there are so many hidden costs that really add up when you are running a property that sometimes the profit margin is really not nearly as good as it looks on paper. So if anyone's listening who's not actually investing in real estate, just a good thing to keep in mind. I think there's, especially where we are in Massachusetts, I think like being a tenant-friendly state, there is some kind of a climate around like there are a lot of people who have a bad taste in their mouth about landlords and investors and property managers. So I think sharing stuff like that maybe does help to enlighten those people a little bit as to like how it really looks behind the scenes.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And it's really interesting actually. I don't know if you've ever gone on Facebook and see like, people posting like their units for rent in some of like the resident like group chats for like the towns and stuff like that. Very, very interesting, guys. If you've never kind of looked at those before, but I was going through one yesterday. It was actually somebody posted a unit in Leominster in like the Leominster like Unite chat or whatever it is. And like there were tons of people like laughing at the price and everything and like ripping these people apart and everything. And it was a really nice unit, and there were a couple people in there like, nope, that's market. Like the entire world is crazy. Like that looks really nice. Like good for him, and like, his mortgage is probably nuts and like he has to manage all these things. It's a business, like good for him, like it looks really good. And, it's interesting to kind of see that dynamic there, because to your point, like a lot of people maybe that aren't really in real estate just see like, oh, you're bringing in $5,000 from these 3 units and your mortgage is only 3, like you're like doing really good and like, you're killing it. It's like, well, maybe, but it's not as big of a margin as you think it is most of the time.
Yeah, I have the same experience listing in Facebook groups. So pro tip to any new investors out there who are self-managing, when you post it in those groups, just turn the comments off to begin with, because I know for me personally, like and this just happened to me, even the other day, like even last week, because we have a short-term rental up by Lake Winnipesaukee that we're looking to turn into a midterm rental. So we're kind of testing the waters to see like if we can get an amount that makes sense. And accidentally, like my assistant had posted it in like local groups in that area, and there were so many people who were commenting, just being like, this is why there's a housing shortage and this and that. So I just deleted it in those groups. Like that goes to show this is the vibe in that group, so I'm just going to take it out.
Yep.
But the last time I had a long-term rental unit available was over the summer, and people were just completely tearing me apart in the groups because the price was a little bit higher because it includes heat and internet.
Gotcha.
So even having that be like the top line that it's included, I was getting totally torn apart in these Facebook groups. So lesson learned, right when you post, just turn the comments off. And the worst people can do is laugh, react at it, and like, or angry react or something. But and it sucks that like good comments can't be made to like help boost it in the feed, but it is what it is.
Yeah, it definitely is extremely interesting. So I wanted to talk about something that you mentioned in there. So how was it kind of going from, picking up those 2 properties to eventually kind of getting into like the short-term rental space and picking up that property up near Winnipesaukee?
Yeah, so to paint a picture of my portfolio now, I have a duplex that has 2 long-term tenants in it. I have a house hack that we live in one side. It's a duplex. We live in one side. We have a long-term tenant in the other side. And then we also have a traveling medical professional in our guest room. So it's a twofold house hack. And then lastly, we have a single family home up by Lake Winnipesaukee that's a short-term rental. So the short-term rental was the second of the 3 purchases. And right after I closed on that first long-term rental duplex, I hit the pavement and was like, I want a short-term rental now. And it's definitely been an interesting ride. Like it's such an emotional roller coaster. It's so much more a customer service business. And I really do feel like being a landlord anyway, you are in customer service because you're providing a service to a customer and they need to be treated as such. But the short-term rental has just been absolutely wild. We launched it like end of May, beginning of June. And summer was incredible. Like financially, summer was amazing. There were some challenges for sure. And then fall has been kind of dead. So, I want to give it the full year to really see how it goes, but I'm really liking midterm rentals and managing a short-term rental, even with all the automations that we have in place. It still takes my assistant a good like 3-4 hours a week. So, that's another expense that we're kind of not really seeing when we do the bookkeeping, right? So yeah, but it has been also really cool to have a place to bring like my friends and family when there's nobody up there. And New Hampshire is another high appreciation state as well. So I like that that's happening in the background. But if anyone like lots of my friends follow me on Venmo and all of my transactions are public. And over the summer, I mean, even continuing through now, it's so funny because people always text me like, what the hell is going on at your New Hampshire house? Because 1 in 4 of our guests since we started, we have had to pay a biohazard fee for. So there's been blood or vomit or some other bodily fluids that our cleaner has to handle. And when the cleaner has to handle a biohazard, we get charged a fee. So we have to pay it back to her. And we have to write what it's for, like very explicitly, so that then we can screenshot that transaction, send it to Airbnb, and hope that they will reimburse us through AirCover.
Gotcha.
AirCover is a total shit show. So for anyone considering getting into short-term rentals and leaning on that, I would not recommend leaning on that. But that's probably been the funniest thing that we've had to deal with this short-term rental is like 1 in 4 guests having this issue. I know that as an Airbnb guest, I personally have never bled all over a house, but I guess I guess lots of people do. So yeah, that's been the most notable part of our experience getting into short-term rentals. And I personally would not buy another short-term rental because it is really cool. Like it's the cool, sexy thing. I personally wouldn't do it again because I hate the seasonality, and it's not really scalable when just having one is already costing us 3 hours a week, you know?
Gotcha. Yeah.
So yeah, that's my 2 cents on short-term rentals.
That's very interesting. Wow.
Yeah, I think in a perfect situation, I would like to have midterm tenants in there, fall, winter, spring, and then continue to do short-term rentals through the summer. That I think would be perfect for that property. So that's what we're working on right now.
That's a really cool idea. That's let me ask you a little bit about kind of like your experience with the medium term space. So I thought about trying it out with the unit in my place that I have open right now. It's just like a 2-bedroom. And I was thinking of trying out like the medium term rental with I forget what it's, one of like the Mass Memorial campuses in Leominster or something. And somebody was telling me, they're like, oh, you might be able to do something like that, given like, you'll have to furnish it, and like there's a little bit more management and stuff like that, a little bit more time required. Um, and I thought it was very interesting. And I was looking on like Furnish Finder and stuff like that to see if there's like actually like a sustainable demand, where if I put, like $5,000 to furnish this thing, is there enough people kind of like cycling through and stuff like that. And I kind of abandoned the idea for now just because of a situation that I'm in. But how has that kind of been from your experience? Is there like, or I guess what's kind of like the demographic that's came through the most on the medium term rental side? Like, is it like a traveling nurse or like a professional? Like,
Yeah, so I would say the vast majority is going to be travel nurses or traveling medical professionals, but there are also insurance companies that have housing lists where, say, your house burns down. You do need temporary housing, and your insurance would help set you up in temporary housing that's furnished. So there's also stuff like that. There's also military housing. There's corporate housing. So like if you only need housing for like a 3-month stint for some kind of travel job through your company that's not a medical professional, there's lists for that, like corporate housing by owner is one of them. So there are a lot of other people who need midterm rentals rather than just medical professionals. But people also think that it's just travel nurses in the medical field, but it's not. Like our midterm renter that we have in our furnished guest room, she is a traveling endoscopy technician. So there's, way more than just nurses who are looking for midterm rentals. I actually like the furnishing process. I think that's fun. Putting together furniture sucks, obviously, but you can hire somebody to do that if you don't want to do it. I think back to when we set up the New Hampshire house. So it's a 4-bed, 2 full bath that you don't really realize how empty a house is until it's really completely empty and you have to fill it with everything that somebody needs to live there for a week. We came up with a U-Haul and did it in 2 days, and it was the most insane 2 days of my life. But just setting up this guest room was way easier, obviously. So setting up the guest room, as far as the financials go, I didn't try to get anything from like Marketplace or skimp on anything. I just bought everything new because I knew if we don't end up liking doing this, then I just want to have a nice, cute guest room. So I wanted it to be nice, right? We spent $1,700 furnishing the room. The only thing that I already had was a bed frame. And you don't have to have like a big elaborate bed frame. So I think maybe, if I needed that, it would have been like $1,750 or something. And coincidentally, $1,700 is what we get for that room. So in just 1 month, I made back my investment on that. And I would say for doing, like a 1-bedroom, you should probably plan like a minimum of 3,000. And that's if you're like really being money conscious. 5,000 would be like an easier budget. For perspective, when we furnished the New Hampshire house, like I said, 4 bedrooms, 2 full bathrooms, it was about $2,250 or $22,250.
Gotcha.
It was around there. Yeah. I did a lot of research prior as far as like what people are normally spending, but there are also companies who will do it for you. So Sarah Weaver, she is one person in the midterm rental space who has a big presence online. And she also has a company called Aria Design Services, where you can pay her and she will order everything, have it sent to the house, come physically set it all up for you. I want to say she even creates like a kind of like a guest guide for you as well, like how to use the heat and how to do this and how to do that. So yeah, so there are people who will do all that stuff for you.
Wow. I'm thinking about it a lot more now, Jessie. The gears are turning again. I was like, oh, maybe at some point I'll get to it, but oh my goodness. I mean, like
Yeah,
1,700 for one room? Holy crap.
and everyone always asks, like, do you share a kitchen and bathroom? Yes, we share a kitchen and bathroom. And, I live to tell about it. It's really not that bad. But yeah, I mean, it works out really great for us because, so my family, it's me, my husband, and my stepdaughter who's in high school. And we could pretty much get along with anybody. Like, we're easygoing people. We're not super, super sticklers about anything in our house being any specific way. So I think we are the perfect people to be doing something like this. It's not for everyone, obviously, but considering our long-term tenant on the other side of the duplex and then having this guest room rented out, our mortgage is $38.50 for this house. That's principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. And of that, we pay 50, which
That's
is
beautiful.
insane. So like, it's so worth it for us.
Wow.
But I can totally see why other people might not think that, it's something that would work for them. But if you want to test the waters, like you had said, get on Furnish Finder, see what similar private rooms or units are renting for. In general, with the midterm rental strategy, your cash flow should be double, if not whatever it would be from a short-term rental.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Wow. Yeah, I'm definitely going to jump on, do a little bit of research after this again. The gears
Yeah,
are really starting to turn.
and it does get you a little bit closer to like running a hospitality business, but I do think it feels way more similar to a long-term rental than it does to a short-term rental. Because I still have guests like, fill out a traditional lease, and many times they extend. So then they're there for 6 months. So you don't actually always have to be looking for a new person every 3 months. Ideally, maybe you'll only have to do it twice a year.
Yeah, that's super cool. Because, like, I was thinking about it, like, I'm
Mhm.
hoping to get.
And it's typically just one.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. It's typically just one person who doesn't really know anyone in the area, and they're mostly just working, eating, and sleeping. So also your unit's going to be in great condition when they leave, and your furnishings are going to be well taken care of. Like, it's a good way to reduce the cost of those turnovers, because then you're just doing more of like an Airbnb turnover where it's mostly just cleaning. Like, you don't need to renovate anything. And a lot of times with midterm rentals, people are doing same day switches so that there's no vacancy. So the, existing midterm tenant will leave at 10. They'll have the cleaning company come in, and then the new midterm tenant will come in at 3.
Wow. That's
Mhm.
beautiful. Oh my goodness. Because like I was thinking about it, Jessie. Like what I was hoping to get out of that unit for a long term, like just regular, new tenant was like 1,500 to 1,600 for like a huge 2 bedroom that's in okay, condition after the turnover. But I definitely have to do some more research because that could make a heck of a difference. And so let me ask you this too. I know.
Yeah, and with a 2-bedroom, you could even rent it by the bedroom to 2 different travel nurses. Mhm.
Wow. Oh my goodness, I have a lot of work to do.
It'd be so worth it. That's what I would do.
That was the other thing I was just about to ask you was like, I know you mentioned it was more or less, kind of like a one person type of demographic that's, going to be renting that space. But, what would the case look like for like a 2 bedroom or even like a 3 bedroom or something? Like I know it's probably kind of hard to tell, but maybe like use one bedroom as a bedroom and then the other one as an office or like, it's probably different for everybody, I guess, but
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would do is create 2 different listings that add up to the same price. So like, if you create one listing for the whole 2-bedroom unit and just say, there's this extra room, maybe furnish both rooms as bedrooms, but create this one unit. Because a lot of people too, like say it's a couple with a child who's homeschooled, and the woman's a travel nurse, the husband works remotely. They might all travel as a family. There are people who need both bedrooms. There's just not as many of them. So you could create one listing for both bedrooms, X amount, say just for numbers sake, 4,000.
Yeah.
Then you could create another listing for just one of the two bedrooms and clearly state in there like both of these bedrooms are rented to traveling professionals for single occupancy only. So you will only be sharing space with somebody else who is strictly here for work. You would have to map out kind of like house rules, which I talked about on the Wire podcast as well. Like we shared some good tips on some good like house rules, and have that be listed for half the price. So like 2,000 a room, something like that. And of course, like you're also going to be paying for all the utilities. So you need to bake that into your cost. But for house rules, simple things like quiet hours after 10, but that might not work if you have people who work overnight. So you have to kind of consider that. Cabinetry in the kitchen can be labeled like bedroom 1, bedroom 2. Even in the kitchen, like in the refrigerator, you can split it in half right down the middle. So you can kind of set things up for them that'll make it easier for them to share a space. But yeah, so I would kind of test the waters and post it both ways, and you get what you get.
Yeah. That's crazy. That was something that was kind of on my mind too, was like, how do the utilities work? Because like for the unit that I have, they have their own forced hot water boiler with oil. So I was like, all right, like, would that be my responsibility? Because they're not, going to be there like the whole time. Or like, would they incur the cost for like 6 months and then figure out like a differential like type of thing, like a credit type of deal? Or, how did like something like that work? But that makes a lot more sense, almost like, I mean, pretty much, renting by the room, like that type of thing. Like, oh, it's all included. Like, but yeah, that makes a lot more sense now.
Yeah, but I have heard of people doing like this is the average cost for this. So if you go over, it gets billed back to you. Like you could bake that into your rental agreement. I do hear about people doing that because you also have to consider that. And one of my peers, I got this from her. There's these two girls, Amelia McGee and Grace Gudenkoff. They're both on Instagram. They have a course on midterm rentals, and they run the Wire podcast. But they were saying like this was such a great point. There's people coming from all over the world, like from other countries, from other parts of this country. And, say someone's traveling to an area like this where it's pretty cold in the winter, they might be cranking the heat like way beyond what's reasonable to us as New Englanders. So even though I know in my head, okay, I should budget this much for oil, if they come from a warm climate and come up here and they're like jacking the heat up to like 90 degrees or something, that heating bill that I was expecting was going to be very different. So that's when you could either do like Nest thermostats that you could control and lock, or just say like, this is the temperature that it should be set on for you to stay around this price, and anything over this price like that you spend on oil will be billed back. So there are ways to do it like that too, because with people coming from different climates, utilities can get kind of crazy.
That makes a lot of sense. We definitely have quite the unique climate up here in New England.
Yeah.
I mean, yesterday it was what, like almost 50 degrees out or something, and now it's I have a space heater down here, and but yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and I do really admire that aspect of like implementing a system like that to be able to be like, oh hey, like we will cover like this much, like this is roughly what it looks like. If you want to jack your heat up to like the top of the thermostat, totally fine. But you're gonna pay for whatever the rule is. And the other question I wanted to ask you is, when it comes to like systems, I know you mentioned is it a virtual assistant, I assume?
I do, yeah. I mean, I hate to even call her that because she is so much more high level than what you would normally think of when you hear VA. She's been with me for about 5 years. She started off very part-time just for my beauty salon. And now her role has transformed into doing so much for both of my businesses. I consider her full-time because most of her working hours are made up of work for my two businesses. She does also have a couple like very part-time clients that she does work for, but she's from around here and we actually used to work
Oh,
together
wow.
at that big box beauty retailer. So when I had posted on my personal pages like, oh, I'm looking for someone to do this like a couple hours a week remotely, and when she responded, I was like, oh my God, this is perfect because I know what she is like when she's handed a job description. I know what she does with it.
Yep.
So I'm like, this is the best person ever that I could have on my team. And, and she's still with me. She moved to California, like her family moved for her husband's job. But everything she does can easily be done remotely. So yeah, it works out pretty great for us.
That's extremely cool. And it's, I
Mhm.
assume it's kind of like just her with, kind of roles in a couple of those businesses and, just kind of managing like pieces here and there and stuff.
Yeah, pretty much. Like anything that's repetitive is better for her to do. Anything that can be done remotely is good for her to do. We have kind of like a visionary integrator dynamic between the two of us. Like I'll have the ideas and know kind of what we have to do to get there. And then I'll sort of map it out for her and be like, here are all these little things like that we need to get done now. But I will probably in 2023 be hiring in-house property management. So she has a couple tasks for my long-term and midterm rentals. Those will transition away to the new in-house property manager, and she'll probably keep the short-term rental just because she really has has a down pat, like how to communicate with people and all the processes that go into that. And we use monday.com to track our tasks.
That's super cool. Wow.
Mhm.
So, Jesse, I wanted to ask you, there is one question that I like to ask everybody, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on it. And that is, how do you define wealth?
How do I define wealth? I define wealth as like complete freedom, time freedom, financial freedom, location freedom. Like you never have to be anywhere at a certain place or time. You never have to worry much about finances. And when I say you never have to worry about finances, I mean like you're not looking at prices at the grocery store, right? If you're comparing prices on private jets, don't worry. I still think you're wealthy, but you're not clipping coupons to buy groceries. So wealth to me is that like time freedom, financial freedom, location freedom. And that's like a big thing that I'm shooting for the end of 2023. Like I want to be able to say that I have those three freedoms in place, and that'll make it a total success for me.
I love that. That's absolutely awesome.
Yeah.
I definitely agree. And that's super cool too, especially,
Mhm.
because like all of this has happened in like such a short amount of time, and like just kind of like leveraging like one resource to another, like one property to another, the businesses, like that's extremely cool. Something that was on my mind. I did want to ask you, kind of like what 2023 looked like. And that's quite the vision. I love it. That's super cool.
Yeah, so 2023 for me, this past fall, I reached that point that I thought was like meant I maybe like screwed up or did something wrong, but I reached that point where I went as far as I could with my own capital, and now it's time to pivot and bring in other people's capital. So going into 2023, I'm trying to get under contract right now on the right deal with a silent partner. I'm the active partner, she's the money partner, and we're looking to get into a 12 unit together. And throughout 2023, I'd like to add 50 long-term rental units with silent equity partners. Um, and maybe turn a couple of them into midterm rentals. We'll see. But yeah.
That's beautiful. That's extremely cool.
Mhm.
How is it, I guess, kind of like, and you don't have to go too much into detail, but like, did you, when it came to like, finding that first equity partner and, kind of like having the conversation of like, oh, hey, like this is what I got going on, this is kind of what I'm looking for, like, did they more or less kind of come to you after seeing, like a lot of the things that you've done already and, kind of like that next vision? Or did you kind of go out and be like, hey, like if I find something, like, is that something that you might be interested in? Like Brandon Turner's kind of phrase.
Yeah. So what was it? Like beginning of October, I went to BPCon, and at that time I really had like this realization there where I didn't have a problem. I just had I was just at a point where I had to pivot. And I was like, wow, this is a point that pretty much every successful investor is going to get to. Like either they've hit that point and they had to pivot, or they're at it now, or they gave up at it, right? Like this point where you've maxed out what you can do on your own, and now it's has to become a team sport. So I left BPCon and I was like, okay, I'm going to make a list of 25 people who I think might have a lot of capital that they know they need to invest, but they don't have the time to learn about different investing strategies, or they just don't want to, or they're just, too busy with other stuff. Or maybe they know people or work with people who fit that description. So I made my list of like 25, 30 people. And I'm like, this is going to be so like awkward and I'm going to get so much rejection here. But I was like, I'm just going to text 5 of these people every day. So every day I'm going to text 5 of these people. I kind of wrote out like a pre-written message basically saying like, as you know, like this is what me and my husband have been working on all year, and we're ready to take that next step and get into something bigger. So we're looking for somebody who may be interested in investing in real estate, but doesn't have the time or knowledge, but wants to get in on the returns and the perks of investing. Do you happen to know anyone who fits the bill?
There it is. Yep.
Like somebody who, like I said, just wants to get in on it. Yeah. And so I wasn't directly asking them. I was kind of like, do you know anyone, like, does this remind you of anyone in your network? Do you know anyone that might want to talk about this? And of course, a couple people just didn't even answer. I got a lot of, I don't think so, but I'll let you know if I think of anyone. But one of my clients actually at my beauty business, I texted her because she used to have an interior design company. So I'm like, oh, she kind of already works with people in the real estate world, right? And it just so happened that she was sitting at dinner with a friend of hers who fit that description perfectly. And it was just so aligned, right? Like the next day she had said to that friend, like, I got this text last night, and it was exactly aligned with what we were talking about, because this friend of hers was saying, I really want to buy another property, but I don't really have time. And because she already owns a 3-family. And so we got connected. We had a phone call. We met for coffee. Then we had another couple phone calls. And that 4th meeting was her saying, like, let's do it. I'm in. And I cleared it with my financial planner, and like, this is a great idea. So she gave me a certain amount that she was comfortable investing in something, knowing what my expected returns are from a good deal, like what my criteria is for a good deal. And we went to my lawyer. We drafted our partnership agreement. So now we're just trying to get under contract. So we're making offers. And I'm pretty optimistic that we'll get under contract within like a week or 2.
That's beautiful. Oh my goodness. I do. I absolutely love that phrase of, like, do you know of anyone who might be interested? That's always something that really stuck out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, because it's kind of like, oh, like, do you know anybody? But like, also, are you there? Like, without kind of having that awkward, like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, it's cool, but like, or, just kind of having that weird kind of conversation, I guess. But that's extremely cool. And I really do like how, you kind of took that, like, daily approach of texting like 5 people and like really just getting that message out there and just kind of putting it out into the world, and who knows, Jessie, like, you have someone right now, but maybe like one or multiple of the people that you texted, a long time ago or whenever you started, maybe now isn't the best time, but maybe like 6 months from now, or, after they see like the next deal that you guys do and put together, then they might hop on that bandwagon, and like, that's a really fascinating thing that I've thought about is like, is it like jumping into that commercial space? Is it kind of like getting that first project under your belt, like getting it stabilized, and then now you have a track record to be like, oh, this is where we started, this is what stabilization looked like, and this is what the dispo looks like, or whatever it was, and like, these are the final numbers, and like, everything went hunky-dory and everything was cool, so like, now, like, you have something to be able to, like, something else I should say, to be able to bring to those people who might be like on the fence, or like they don't know, or maybe like don't really understand as much, and be like, hey, I've done this before, like, this is one of the previous projects that we just finished up, everything was cool, people made the returns that they were supposed to, and we're just looking to get bigger. That's extremely cool. Good for you.
Thanks. And yeah, I agree. I think like just this will be like proof of concept
Yep.
that I can then share with other people who are interested in investing but don't have the time or knowledge. But I do also already have like a couple other silent partners that are sort of just waiting in the wings like for the next thing. And the more you just talk to people about what you're doing and how you want to do it, people will kind of come out of the woodwork who are the perfect fit. A lot of people will turn to like posting on Instagram about it, but you have to kind of consider, are the people who follow you on Instagram going to be those people? Like, do they fit the description of someone who's interested in this? Because in many cases they don't. Um, but yeah, just talk. I mean, everyone says it, but just talking to as many people as you can about what you're doing and how you want to do it, people will kind of come out of the woodwork.
I love that. That's awesome. So, Jesse, I wanted to ask you one more question. The question is, do you read? And I know something you said earlier. I definitely got that message with the like the traction and rocket fuel, integrator and visionary concept there. But I was gonna ask, what is your favorite business, investing, or real estate book that you would recommend to anyone? Or podcast or audiobook or anything that you consume, pretty much.
Oh my God, I'm not sure. I mean, I bought at least half of the Biggerpockets bookstore and
I
have
feel
gone through all of it.
that.
And I really like Brandon Turner's books because you can tell in the way that he writes that he's just a regular guy who's not an author or writer. He's just a guy who has this knowledge and he wants to share it with you. So it's just like so easy to read. Um, and then for podcasts, I always recommend the Biggerpockets Rookie podcast or the Biggerpockets Real Estate podcast. Um, I think for business books in general, I don't have one that sticks out because I think so many of them are too generalized and like don't necessarily apply to every different type of business or type of entrepreneur. But for podcasts, those are the two that I'm always listening to. I also want to start listening to Rob Dyrdek's podcast because he was a guest on the Biggerpockets Real Estate podcast recently, and I really liked what he had to say. And I guess his podcast is super popular for entrepreneurs, anyone self-employed. So I want to get into that. As far as what I'm reading right now, it's absolutely pains me to try to get through, but I'm trying to get through the Biggerpockets tax strategies book, but it's just like I'm so bored to tears by that stuff that it's just been kind of sitting on my nightstand, like not getting anywhere. But yeah, so that's what I'm working on right now.
Those are awesome. And it's funny you said that about Rob Dyrdek's podcast. I don't know if you've heard, he did an interview with Ed Milet on Ed Milet has a podcast too. I'm not 100% sure like who that is yet. I should know, but I'm gonna do some research. But like so there was an interview on Ed Milet's podcast with Rob Dyrdek like not too long ago. And I'm listening to it for the second time right now. The first time was like earlier this week. And like, oh my God, like there was so much like Rob Dyrdek, like he's just like such an incredible guy. And like this is the first time that I've kind of heard like this like self-development, like really crazy, high level mindset action, like all this like wicked crazy stuff. The first time that I saw like this side of him, because prior, I just saw him in like skateboarding and like, in this movie with Paul Rodriguez a long time ago, like a skateboard movie and stuff. And literally like, I couldn't recommend that episode enough. It's so crazy like how like high level it is. And I totally feel you on that one. Like I want to dig into more of like Rob Dyrdek stuff just because like I don't even know like how to describe it, right? Like just like the way that he's talking about this stuff, like oh my God. I
Yeah, you know what else too? Like so often you see people like that and you're like, you think they must have some skill that you don't have or like have access to some resource that you don't have. And, like being wealthy, of course, yeah, that's a pretty big resource that he has access to that many people don't. But he had said on the Biggerpockets Real Estate podcast that he realized at a certain point that his businesses, even though they were like, multi-million or maybe even billion-dollar businesses, that he was just breaking even. And he's like, this isn't right. Like I'm exerting so much energy into these and like there's so much money coming into them, but I'm essentially just breaking even. And that was inspiring to me because it's more inspirational, I think, to hear of these high level people things not really working out the way that they planned or the way that they intended, I'm like, oh, okay, like they deal with stuff like this too. So it made me like him that much more and like want to go listen to his podcast that much more, because he just, came right out and said like that it doesn't always work out exactly how you thought. And like sometimes you don't even have the awareness to see that until like you really are just truly breaking even. So I thought that was really cool. That was a big takeaway I had from that episode. It just made him so much more relatable.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I totally feel you on that one. Like, because I feel like that type of stuff isn't always talked about, with maybe like people of that caliber and like establishment, I guess you could say. So it's almost kind of
Mhm.
like grounding, you know what I mean? Like, oh, like everybody's dealing with crap. Like these guys, even though, they have like multi-million dollar, billion-dollar businesses, whatever it might be, like things might still be hitting the fan too, just like you and I, you know what I mean? And like just because they're in like a much higher level spot, like there's still systems that need to be implemented, there's still implementations that need to be implemented, things that need to pivot. Like it's like their business isn't just like freaking perfect all the way around, and I feel like it doesn't come around that often, like when you can kind of hear things like that, from these businesses that are like just so large. And yeah, one of the things that he was talking about on my Let's podcast was he was like, yeah, dude, like literally my day is filled with like, oh no, he was talking about recording. I don't know if it was ridiculousness or like one of the shows that he was doing. He was recording like, several episodes in a day. And like, there was like wardrobe changes and like everything was so packed together. And like, he was literally just like in such a spot where like he was just like grinding like there was no tomorrow, and like it was starting to burn him out, and like he was getting sick of it. And he's like, oh, honestly, like, I know, I've been doing this show for so long and like all these episodes and everything, and like, everything's great, but like I really don't want to do it anymore, like just because it was kicking his ass so much. So he started to systematize, and he was basically taking things like, oh, if there's like three wardrobe changes in between episodes for like a half hour long each. He's like, what if, we took out a couple of those, took like 15 minutes out of lunch. Now I just recovered an hour, and now like I'll record a bunch of things in advance to cut down on like an hour after each episode every day. So now we can crank out, a couple episodes in a day, and like it doesn't weigh me down like it did prior. And like now, he can just come like full of energy and everything, like doing the same thing that he was before, but 10 times more systematized than he did, with like a 10 times better result. And it's something that like really made me think, Jesse. And like one of the things that he said in the very beginning of that podcast was that like all he tries to do with like all, everything and the businesses and ventures in his life is he just tries to systematize everything and like literally just keep automating it, automate every single thing that you can. And like that's all he focuses on. And like to your point, like it was really crazy, hearing that from somebody that like, has all these like crazy, shows and movies and like investment stuff and like all this crazy stuff going on. Cause it's so real, like it's similar problems that, like you and I would have. And like these are real problems that like everybody deals with in different aspects. And it really hit kind of a different spot in my head and was absorbed differently hearing it from somebody like that. And it's like, yeah, dude, like, my day was packed. Like I was, beyond like stuffed with all kinds of things that were going on. And it was starting to lead me to not like what I was doing anymore. So I basically just had to systematize everything, cut down on meetings. And now like all that energy came back, like, everything's cool. And like, we're still recording all this crazy stuff. And, he likes it 10 times more again. It really got me thinking like the past couple days, like, wow, like everybody deals with this kind of stuff, and if you can just automate it, like figure out ways to put the systems to like do things before you need to and be proactive. And yeah, it really made me think for a while. I definitely agree with you.
Yeah, and like you said, he deals with the same problems.
Yep.
And like I was saying earlier, like he doesn't have any special skills that other people don't have. He didn't have access to any sort like resources that other people didn't have. But when 10 people are faced with the same problem, like 8 of them aren't even going to do anything, and 2 of them are going to handle it really well. Like they're going to navigate it in a way that other people just aren't brave enough to or aren't willing to. And he is, and that's why he's achieved the success that he has. You know, like everyone has the same problems. It's just like how you handle them is what differentiates you from someone like him.
I love that. 100%.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on here, Jessie. This was absolutely awesome. I feel like we could keep talking for like hours and hours and hours.
I know.
We're on
I really could. But thanks for having me. This was really fun.
Yeah, definitely. So where on like social media and stuff can you be found? Like everything, like Airbnb, like everything you have.
Oh my God.
I'll put it down below.
Mostly Instagram. So on Instagram, I'm Jessie Dillon with an underscore at the end. And I have a link tree with links to everything else from there. So the best place to connect with me is definitely on Instagram.
Beautiful. I love Linktree. It's very efficient. But awesome, Jessie. Thank you so much again for coming on here. This was absolutely awesome.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me.
That's a wrap for today's episode. We want to thank you for being a valued listener of the Creating Wealth Podcast. Make sure to visit www.creatingwealth.com to connect with us. Dive into our ever-expanding library of informative blogs and explore a wide range of additional valuable resources. Stay tuned for our next episode as we continue to create wealth together.